You've been hearing a lot of stuff about the inner workings of TNA and kind of like the end of the Scott D'Amore era and what the company might be looking like going forward. Now, look, if you guys are here and you're a TNA doomer and you think TNA is going out of business and if you think TNA is being sold by WWE or sold to WWE, I'm sorry, this is not the podcast for you. And I've been trying to tell you guys for weeks that none of that was happening, that Anthem is absolutely committed to TNA. If they were going to sell it, they would have accepted Scott D'Amore's offer. But they did not. They actually have plans, and those plans just don't involve certain people, and most specifically Scott D'Amore. So, it was what were you hearing about, how D'Amore exited and maybe why they moved on from him at that point?
Well, first you made a comment about Scott D'Amore's offer, and a lot of people were saying they should have sold to Scott D'Amore. The Scott D'Amore offer was never a thing. It was a thing, but the rumor that went around was that he found out he was getting fired. So then let me rephrase that. He tried to buy the company. They said no. And then that's what soured things. And then they fired him. Like, that's not what it was. It was like a last ditch, like, hey, you're being let go. And then he very quickly tried to put together an offer to buy the company to save his own job, in a sense.
Yeah.
The company legally had to hear him out, but it was never a thing. It was never of interest. There's not interest in selling it. They're not selling to WWE. That's just not going to happen. They're very excited about this partnership. I'm not under the impression it's about the talent for them. I don't think they care who. Like, for the fans, they're like, hey, who's going to show up from NXT? That's not. You have to think like a business person. Like, that's not what they care about. If they can get their talent on WWE, they benefit from that. They don't benefit as much getting NXT talent on their show. Their benefit is the rub from WWE. And I think that's where a lot of the partnership is. Are we going to see some NXT people? Probably. I'm just saying it's not going to be to the extent that people are fantasy booking.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be similar to AEW, whereas like AEW sent Private Party that one time, and then what else did they really do? I mean, obviously Kenny and Christian Cage, they were the champions, so they had to be on the show, but there was no like talent exchange. AEW had no interest in anyone from Impact at the time, so it's going to be a healthier relationship than that, but they're more concerned with the rub from WWE, and they're very pleased with how the Battleground angle took place in the match. It was a very added bonus that there was blood involved, because I didn't know where the blood came from watching the match, but it's because Jordan got her earring ripped out. But it did add to the match, and what they were going for was a finish that protected the champion. They said, we can't just send our champion on their show to lose. She has to be protected, but it was someone who has like a business mindset looks at it and says, okay, they were promoting whatever you think about Ash by Elegance. They're promoting Ash and Jordan.
Yeah.
And the Slammiversary. That's what they get from it.
Yeah.
And people,
her name on this show is Ash by Awful, by the way.
Yes. Ash by Awfulness. Yeah. I don't, that's one of the few names I don't mess with on my show, but yeah, for the sake of this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, back to Scott, and we'll put a bow on the whole Scott D'Amore story, because I think I've exhausted, Scott D'Amore topics and Scott D'Amore thumbnails ever since he got fired. And, it came out that he was like, try to buy it and yada, yada, yada. In your opinion, and from what you're hearing, what do you think ultimately why did the relationship go south? Like, why did they want to move on from him? What was he not doing that they wanted him to do?
So I'm going to be real here, because when you listen to the Meltzers and the Sean Ross Sapps of the world, I'm not saying their information isn't correct, but when they report, they're going to be like, well, we want to be on TNA's good side. We want to be on Scott D'Amore's good side. We want to be on this person's good side, or whatever, because that's what they do. I don't give a shit. Scott D'Amore don't know me. I don't know him. He's not going to DM me after this. My loyalty is to TNA and who I know there. But like the way it's worded to me is that if you're good at your job, you're going to keep your job.
Yeah.
There's a perception that Scott D'Amore was a lot better at his job than he was. Now, he had a great relationship with the wrestlers. That's go you can tell that by on social media. You can tell when they wrote the letter, like they liked Scott. It's not that he was like an unlikable person, but for the people appointed over him, they weren't as happy with his performance as as the fans thought they should have been. Now, when he got let go, I was guilty of it. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, me
This guy
too.
saved your company, and that's what some of the problems were backstage was that he was allowing the perception to be that he was single handedly responsible for the for the growth, for the excitement, all the good that was going on. He kind of allowed that perception to be that he was the dude, when in fact there was a team of people. And in the military, dude, like because we get it the worst. When
Mhm.
you have that supervisor ahead of you that I'm not saying he did nothing. That's not the picture I'm painting. But the picture that you have, I mean, the picture I'm trying to paint is when you have someone above you that really isn't doing that much work. It's the people underneath them, and then at the end of the day, the recognition goes for that person.
Yeah.
Um, dude, I was on a deployment one time. Uh, it was me and three dudes. We had office jobs, and we were busting our ass this whole deployment. Our supervisor couldn't even have done our jobs if we called in sick that day. Like he didn't know what we did. End of the deployment, this dude gets the medal, and we're just standing there with our dicks in our hands, and clapping for him.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so again, I don't want to paint a picture Scott wasn't doing anything, but there
Right.
was a team that was really responsible for a lot of what was going on. But the perception has always been, well, Scott D'Amore is saving this company, and when you do that, you're protecting yourself. So
Yeah.
eventually, he gets let go, and of course, the fans are like, "What are you doing? He did all these things," and I was guilty of it. I got in arguments with Twitter. That's one time where the trolls actually get one over on me, the marks, because I had people tell me Scott's not the only person at the company. And I said, "Well, Scott's the head of the snake. He's everything runs through him." But I was actually wrong with that. That's one. Um, but again, I just kind of fell into a perception that they needed Scott, and that they don't. So it's the company knew they were getting rid of Scott for a long time.
Yeah.
So when these rumors have come out that, well, Scott wanted to spend money and Anthem didn't, that is not true. Um, and it's easy to feel like, well, I mean, it's easy to believe why we thought that was true because we're watching the show. We're like, yo, it looks like shit. It's looked like shit for a long time. There's people on screen who are horrible characters. Um, so it's easy for us to believe, hey, this, everything runs through this dude. Um, but no, really, what it was is that the company is like, well, we're going to spend money. You're just not going to spend it. They had the vision a long time ago that, but their vision and Scott's division didn't line up. Um, the perception was also that kind of Scott was the one that's like, hey, we got to get this show looking good. It's got to look like a national televised product. Really, the company felt very stagnant under him because he wasn't making the necessary changes. So when we're sitting here and saying, yo, this show looks horrible on TV, the venues look horrible, the editing looks horrible, they know that. What was making me so mad as a podcaster was like, are they fucking blind?
Yeah.
And but that wasn't the case. They knew. These people backstage like, hey, this show looks awful. He was the one holding it back from like making the necessary changes. So you saw when Scott was let go, all these other people were let go too, from David Sahadi to fucking David Penzer. This was done because the company did not find them good at what they did. And as fans, again, we're like, oh my God, the company's falling apart. They're just getting rid of people and bringing their people in. That's not what it is. They just said, hey, we have to bring in better people. and they want to bring in television people who know how to make a show look like a nationally televised broadcast, not like an independent show, which is how it's looked for a really, really long time. I've been saying for like 3 years now, you have to look more like NXT than you do like MLW if you want to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And the company uh believes sorry, I thought this comment was directed at me.
Don't worry about the comments. I'll get to the comments in a little bit. Well,
I know, I
I'm
just kinda
saving the
looked down
comments.
for
I
a
just
second. I thought
you
someone
you
was
just
trashing
riff,
me.
brother. You just riff.
I'm gonna I thought someone was trashing me for a second. I just looked
Yeah.
down and came across it. But the they knew the changes needed to be made. Scott was not making the necessary changes. Uh and that's kind of what it came down to. And again, he had a great relationship with the wrestlers. Will Ospreay even said Scott D'Amore single-handedly responsible for the resurrection of TNA. And you can't run a business like that where one guy is responsible, where everyone thinks, where everyone has thankless jobs, and the one guy is taking all the glory for everything. You know, um, but yeah, it was incorrect in the sense that it wasn't that they were telling Scott no. They said you're just not going to spend our money. And I guess what I was saying before I got distracted there was that they're going to bring in people who know how to make television,
Yeah.
not wrestling people. And that's kind of what people say about Tony Khan, right? Like, stop bringing in your friends, stop putting people in positions with no experience.
Well, and stop bringing in WWE people, and we're gonna get to the AEW thing because I think since Tony Khan has brought in the Kevin Dunn disciples and the Vince McMahon disciples, the show has gotten worse, and I think it looks worse than it did before. Whenever he had his own people, when he had
Yeah,
people with original ideas, and now you see WWE, they brought in Lee Fitting from ESPN, and like the show looks great.
right.
Yeah,
And people knocked WWE for a long time for creatively bringing in people who didn't know wrestling, and it makes sense. Well, they wanted people who knew television, episodic television, and drama. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, you got to throw some wrestling experience in there with some of the creative team, but to people that didn't make sense. And I think TNA is kind of going a similar direction where they're like, we want to make a good television show, and we're gonna make those changes little by little, but we have to get rid of this guy in order to get rid of this guy and this guy and this guy also because he's not doing it. So we're gonna have to do it. It's
yeah,
like the sports franchise who like a coach falls in love with a player and they have to trade that player away to get the coach to to stop following their to break that love interest. It was kind of like that, but it was like, hey, we got to get rid of the coach, um and then we can get rid of the players after that. So you know that it's just what was worded to me in person and reiterated to me a couple days ago was that if something looks like it doesn't make sense, then you probably didn't get all the information.
yeah,
And that's what it was for us as fans. We said, well, this doesn't make sense that Scott's gone. This doesn't make, why would they just fire him out of the blue? Because we didn't have all the information. Meltzer didn't have all the information. You say it all the time, like Anthem doesn't talk to Meltzer. They don't, they're not talking to Sean Ross Sapp. They're just speculating. But this company is not talking to the fucking dirt sheets. So if something
yeah.
doesn't make
So
sense, it's because we don't have
yeah,
the information.
so Meltzer and Sapp are talking to TNA people, but the Anthem executives, like Leonard Asper and Anthony Ciccone and those other guys, yeah, they're probably not talking, but like other people like wrestlers and staff members that work in TNA, they're absolutely talking to the dirt sheets, and that's why we're not getting like the full picture of Anthem side of it because I thought this whole thing was a disaster, and this show. The television product right now is not great. I will say tonight. I'm pretty sure I watched a little bit of TNA, and I'm pretty sure Tasha Steeles and Danny Luna wrestled at a funeral because the people in the audience were all dead. They might well have been behind tombstones with how quiet they were. So
Wow.
it's been tough. It's been tough at times. So I am a little. I'm actually kind of like I'm cautiously optimistic about some of the news that you're breaking here, especially with them wanting to upgrade the television production, because that's been a thorn in my side for years. Because once I stopped just being a guy that watches it on TV and I was watching it every week and analyzing it and doing a podcast, I would notice all these minor details and these mistakes, and sometimes huge mistakes that they would make just in their television production, like white balancing the cameras and like, being backstage and like, Gia Miller, like you were always say Gia Miller's got shadows all over her face and looks terrible. Well, Gia Miller, more times than not, the microphone that she's using is fake. It's not a real microphone. The microphone they're using is the camera's microphone. Like the audio is always off, and like the live, like the whole production has been trashed. And I've been saying forever, like the TV director Sahadi needs to go, because all this is happening on his watch, and now we know why he wasn't gone, is because he was being protected by Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore is gone, and now Dave Sahadi was no longer safe, and so they ultimately made the decision to get rid of him. And looks like they might have a replacement. I don't know who it is, but they got somebody in mind. It looks like.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is, and and more people are gonna be gone here soon. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah,
They obviously you can't make all those kind of changes at once, but they're gonna make incremental changes for the show to be better. They have Anthem execs at the shows now, and they're trying to help with the production of the show and how do we make this look better, to where before Scott was essentially like blocking those people from being involved. I don't know if it was like a control thing. I don't know exactly, but um, I don't think he had the dedication to how the show looked like the fans thought he did. They thought he was the one that was like, "Hey, we're gonna up the production." That's not what it was, because remember they said, "Hey, we're gonna have these production upgrades," and then it just disappeared. People
yeah,
thought that had to do with Scott D'Amore being gone. Like, no, Scott was the one who was kind of like blocking that from really happening and really growing. And now that he's gone, those people are now at the shows, and they're working with the team and trying to get it, trying to get it to look better. The venues, they're kind of stuck with some of these venues right now, because some of the people they got rid of are the ones that got these venues. But they're going to focus here probably 2025 of venues that are they're gonna look good on television and look, um, as it was worded, like a national television show, not like a super indie. So they're
yeah.
aware that it looks indie, doesn't look good. We're probably stuck with that for the rest of the year. But then I would say, yeah, because they gave us venues all the way up to Cleveland. I don't know what the Cleveland venue looks like. I have no idea.
I'll just tell you what it looks like. Game Changer Wrestling is running that next month. So,
Okay, okay.
yeah, that kind of tells you exactly what that's going to look like on television.
All right. I think it was probably I think it was already booked, but
Yeah.
that's kind of I believe that's what was worded to me, is like next year they're gonna try to make just run some venues that just look better on TV.
Yeah, because right now they're booking a lot of older venues and indie venues, and a lot of the venues that ECW was running, which makes sense because Lou D'Angeli was in charge, and so he's booking old ECW venues. And I think Gerard in the chat said something to the effect of the new guy that they have right now, and it says his name is Greg Bagarosi, Greg Bag of Donuts.
Like a donut. Oh, dude, that's the military name right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's doing it right now. He was a former ECW and an MLW guy. I don't know that guy is like the long-term replacement. So I think eventually they're going to have like a full team in place. Now I theorized this, last week or a couple weeks ago. What are you hearing as far as like TNA and Invicta kind of being involved more often, and maybe even having either maybe not if the same production and live events department, but working together more?
God, I didn't ask a whole lot in regards to that. It's not going to be the same production team. I'm under the impression it's just going to be Anthem will be more heavily involved in the TNA side of production. So that's just kind of what was uh, the way that it was explained to me. I didn't really ask much about Ivica and their deal and all that. If I'm being honest, I don't care about them. I know like a lot of TNA fans do. I see it all the time in our chats. People like, Invicta this and this. Like, I give fucking two shits about them. So that's why I
Yeah.
didn't really like dig too deep into it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, Full Sail University is something that's been kind of being tossed out there for a couple of months now. And last week, Meltzer said that deal was all but dead because of Lou D'Angeli being fired, and Lou D'Angeli was the point man. But he did end the sentence by saying that the people in the company still have a glimmer of hope that deal was still alive. And then Sean Ross Sapp on Sunday night after Battleground was saying kind of some of the stuff that you're saying with like, hey, like no, it's not like TNA is not going anywhere. They're not selling. They're not going out of business. He was saying that on that podcast, but he said that they're looking at moving to a fixed location like relatively soon, and maybe even I can't remember exactly what he said, but kind of what you've been hinting at, like a fixed location and things looking a lot better in 2025. What do you think about Full Sail University? Is that even still on the table, or did that die with Lou D'Angeli?
I don't have information in that. I will say I don't believe it is a dead thing.
Yeah.
I don't. That the vibe I'm got is not that I have is that it's not dead. But there's no it's very tight-lipped regarding that. That could be for the good, good could be for bad. I just know it's the whole situation is really tight-lipped. And one of the things that I'm trying to help them communicate to the fans is that um everything was again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. Everything was not Scott. So again, I'm guilty of it. When Scott was gone, I was like, "There goes the relationship with WWE." I said that. Um, Scott did not set up Jordan Grace to wrestle at Battleground. It was the current, uh, the current Anthem guys who made this happen. Like they are fostering their own personal relationships. It's not like, hey, Scott's gone, so AAA, New Japan, like I think you had kinda talked about it, like, well, there goes AAA, like, that's actually not the case, it's just on hold because there's so many changes going on right now, but we'll see those partnerships again down the road, but this current team is fostering all these relationships, and they are getting out and doing these things, but again, the perception was Scott, Scott, Scott. Scott was the guy, and nothing operates without Scott, and that's just not the case. When Battleground happened, uh who was there?
It
Dr.
was
Ariel, uh,
it was a Chon Chon, and it was Ariel Schnerer and
right.
Jonathan Gresham. So it's pretty funny because Gresham actually, and Gail Kim, and Gresham actually posted the picture on Twitter, and he deleted it. But because I am quick, I made sure to nab that photo before he deleted it, and I was able to post it because Chon Chon looks like a mob boss. So I was like,
Yeah,
if Jordan, I had to make my joke that if Jordan Grace loses, someone's getting whacked. So I made that, and then but he ended up deleting the tweet, and I think it's because Anthem execs don't want to be seen like as being the faces of the company. They just want the company to be the face of the company, if that makes any sense.
correct. And that is exactly what I tell you exactly, that is why the tweet came down. They specifically did not wanna be on screen. Um, the belief is that Scott D'Amore would have wanted to be on screen, or whoever, was there with him would have said, some of these guys they got rid of, if they were there with him, the belief is that, "Hey, we wanna be on screen. We wanna be recognized. We made this happen." Like, I've said on my podcast, this company is faceless. I wouldn't recognize any of these Anthem guys if I walked past them on the street. I thought that was a bad thing. Uh,
Yeah.
it's actually a good, now that my perspective is changing, I'm seeing it's a good thing because they don't want the focus to be on them. They're not trying to get themselves over, which is what I said about Scott. I said it about um, Don Callis. I was like, these guys, they're on screen and they're trying to get themselves over. We saw Scott do it at the expense of the talent all the time. Anthem did not want Scott on TV.
That was my next question.
Right.
So yeah, so they because I found it to be hilarious that within a couple of months after him being promoted to TNA president, because for the most part he was the executive vice president, and Ed Nordholm was the president, and then Scott gets promoted to TNA president, and next thing you know, he's an on-air authority figure. He has booked himself in the co-main event of the biggest pay-per-view of the year in his hometown, and he wins.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and yeah, So
He's
what
hitting,
did they think of Scott being on television?
yeah, and he's hitting Canadian destroyers and because you notice when Scott was on TV, he was always putting himself over. He had the snarky comments, um, with the exception of him going through the table, which happened twice because they failed to use the proper fluid to light it on fire the first time. The first angle was with the good hands and Bubba Ray. They put him through a table. They completely fucked the angle up, so they had to reshoot it later with Macklin, and when they actually put him through a fiery table. Uh, but with the exception of those moments, Scott always got over. Like he was always. You remember a wrestler would come up and talk to him, and he just starts telling jokes and, oh, well, you're in the main event tonight. You know what? You're in a street fight, haha, and then walks away, always leaving the heels looking like freaking goofs. But they weren't a fan of Scott on screen. That was why Santino was brought in, was to transition him off screen. Because of course that coincided with him going through the table.
Mhm.
But then he ended up right back on, and then we had two authority figures, and it made no. There's my dogs. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's yeah,
Uh,
it's all good.
one of the cats walked in front of him. Da, 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 da. So I was saying they distracted me there for a second. But he's always getting himself over, and they
And they
had
had two authority
two
figures. So
authority figures.
Santino was brought in to replace Scott as an on-screen authority figure, and then Scott found his way back onto TV, and Anthem was
Right.
probably pretty upset with that.
Yeah, and now you got two, and we're watching on TV. It looks ridiculous. We're like, who the hell's in charge? Um, Gail Kim didn't want to do it. It looked like obviously it would have been much better. People would have taken to her much better if she was on
Yeah.
screen as the authority figure. But
But BQ BQ, here's a thought. How about, now hear me out, no authority figure. You don't have one. You just have Tom Hannafin announce that TNA executives have made the following match. Like, you can do a wrestling show without an authority figure on screen.
you can, but I mean, I remember back in the Tessa Blanchard days, she's always like, I talked to Impact Management, and there's no face to it. I just feel like you have to have a face. I wouldn't have a comedy character in the role.
Yeah, because
But
Santino sucks, I think.
Yeah, the humor doesn't work in this because he doesn't have the wrestler. So Santino's humor worked in WWE because so many wrestlers were over. And when I say over, I'm talking about real, genuine stars to work with. He doesn't have that here. So when he mispronounces, Brian Myers' name, like who cares?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't hit the same way. Um, but yeah, he was brought on to be the authority figure. Scott got himself back on TV, wouldn't leave TV. Scott was all over TV. I mean, when I was doing the Cool Factor, TW's always like, it's the new star of the show.
Yeah.
This guy's, he's all over the place.
Yeah. So to put a bow on all the TNA talk, we've gone 45 minutes on TNA. So if you're not a TNA fan and you come here for some AEW talk or some WWE talk, we're gonna get to that in a little bit. But I want to get to the chat first. But to put a bow on the TNA stuff, now we're just getting. I think Scott's side, and I don't know if it's coming from him or not, if it's coming from people close to him. I think we've kind of heard from that side, and I think this is probably the first time that we've been hearing a little bit from the other side. Like, here's the other side of the story, and that's why we wanted to present that. BQ and I don't know Scott. I know people that know him and they love him and he's awesome. But it just didn't work out with Anthem, and it's not, the relationship wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, and a lot of stuff that's been presented might have been misrepresented. And so we're just trying to get the other side of the story out because BQ just kind of heard all this news. And so we've offered him this platform to be able to do that. So thank you for telling us all this stuff. But like when BQ says, like, I'm hearing this, BQ is not saying this is what I think of Scott D'Amore. That's not what's happening. And that's not what's happening with me. This is just what he's been hearing from people with inside TNA that's getting that Anthem side out there.
And there's a little more I'll get into when I review Impact here. Creatively, there's a couple of things I'll throw in there.
Yeah. So everybody go to find Negative BQ on YouTube and check out the Impact Lounge. Join the Impact Lounge Facebook group. I'm in there. We're always in there talking shit, and that's where a lot of this news actually originated, was because BQ was dropping bombs in the middle of the night. I woke up at 5 a.m. I was like, damn, BQ, what the hell's going on?